This is a story on the value of actually knowing others. You may believe you have a good read on someone, but in reality, you have no idea what they are thinking or capable of. This occurred perhaps 4 or 5 years ago. My girlfriend, Stacy, and I were getting tired of the struggles of everyday life. She recommended we rent a cabin in the woods to disappear for a few days. Naturally, I loved the idea, but I wasn't exactly flush with cash. So she proposed another suggestion. My best friend Randy and his girlfriend were close to us, so she offered that they join us for a romantic getaway. It would be fun to hang out, and they could pay for part of the trip. I loved the idea, and Randy agreed right away when I presented it to him. Because we were traveling in the middle of winter, we wanted a cabin with a fireplace and somewhere that would make us feel warm and snug. Stacy located a place, and we booked it for the end of the month. We were excited and began arranging meals and other enjoyable activities at the cottage. Randy and his fiancée ended their relationship less than a week before their trip. The breakup was unexpected and did not go well. Stacy and I debated whether we should return Randy's money or simply say nothing. We didn't have the cash to accomplish this on our own, but it's also unfair to make Randy pay for half of a vacation he won't even be taking. I called Randy to discuss it, and he said not to worry about it. I offered to return his money multiple times, but he persisted on continuing our romantic holiday. When I gave Stacy the news, she was thrilled, and we began to plan our trip alone. The next day, only a few days before the trip, Randy informed me that he had found someone else to accompany us on the trip. I told him I wasn't wild about the concept, and Stacy agreed. We didn't want to fly with some strange rebounder that Randy barely knew. I attempted to explain to him that travel compatibility is real and that we don't know anything about this woman. Randy begged, and after a few minutes, he convinced me to do it. He offered to pay for my entire half of the vacation, and he claimed that his new girlfriend would be cool and we would adore her. Stacy and I were not pleased. We knew the vacation may end in an unpleasant disaster. That alone would be a nightmare story. It took a while, but we decided to make the most of the circumstance. The weekend had arrived, and we carpooled to the cottage. Randy introduced us to Lucy, his new girlfriend, while we were in my truck. She seemed lovely and even calm. Stacy and I are not bashful. We can be loud and irritating. We spent the whole of the drive trying to get to know Lucy, but she wasn't really communicative. By the time we arrived at the cottage, I had only a vague memory of her voice. The trip began well. We all settled in and hung out around the fireplace, chatting. Stacy and I enjoy playing card games, particularly Uno. We absolutely enjoy how simple it is, and we can play it almost anywhere at any time. So Stacy suggested we play Uno, and everyone agreed. Even Lucy appeared to be coming out of her shell during the Uno game. We saw our first red flag of the weekend when Stacy called Uno, signifying that she only had one card remaining. Lucy looked across at her and began ripping into Stacy in her normally mousy voice. We all laughed at first, believing she was just teasing, but that only made things worse. Lucy began to become wild. She was yelling that Stacy had to be cheating because she couldn't have only one card remaining. Stacy was defending herself, while Lucy continued to act like a kid, shouting about her infidelity. I am not being sarcastic when I say she was yelling about Uno in front of people she hardly knew. Even if Stacy was cheating, which she wasn't, this was an exaggerated reaction. When Randy tried to calm her down, she flung all of her cards and exited the living room. He apologized to us, and we simply laughed it off. Later that night, Stacy served dinner, and Lucy appeared absolutely fine, almost as if she hadn't thrown a temper tantrum a few hours earlier. This is red flag number 2. While we were eating, Lucy began to overshare information about her and Randy's intimate time together. Things you don't say to others in public, such as really intimate and personal information, which I won't reveal in the narrative for Randy's sake. I could see he felt humiliated. I continued trying to make jokes and change the subject. She eventually stopped, and the 4 of us did not do anything for the remainder of the evening. That night, Stacy awoke me in the middle of the night and told me to listen. I went up and heard Lucy and Randy arguing. I couldn't understand what they were saying because the bedrooms were on opposite ends of the cottage, and our door was closed. I could tell they were fighting based on the tone of their arguments and the inflection in their voices. The discomfort of this was insane, and we didn't want to make Randy feel any worse. So we pretended we hadn't heard anything and decided not to bring it up the next day. The following morning and day were uneventful. Randy appeared aloof, and we rarely saw or heard from Lucy. It wasn't until that night that things became strange. I awoke in the middle of the night to see Randy looming over me. It terrified me. When I asked him what he was doing, he appeared horrified. He asked if he could remain in our room tonight, and if we could lock the door. I was perplexed and requested him to explain why. He apparently awoke throughout the night and saw Lucy standing at the foot of the bed, staring at him when he asked what she was doing. She simply shrugged and stated that she was watching him sleep, just in case. Whatever that means. He stated they stared at each other for a bit before she turned and went out of the room. She hadn't returned to the room even after several minutes. He decided to get up and go check on her to make sure she was all right. And then he discovered something on her side of the bed. He pulled the blanket slightly, and there on the bed was a huge knife. That's when he decided to sneak into our room. He walked gently through the dark cabin, trying not to make any disturbance. When he entered the living room, he heard Lucy singing to herself and moving around like she was almost dancing. He stated she appeared to be sleepwalking, but it got worse when she got close to her bedroom door. The floor creaked quietly, and she stopped humming. She turned toward him and added, in a menacing tone, "I see you." Randy commented that she did not appear to be gazing at him, but rather in his direction. She then turned back and began humming and skipping about the dark cabin. When he entered our room, he shut the door. I was trying to process it all. At the same time, Stacy awoke. We were in the middle of nowhere, so we weren't sure what to do. Lucy could have simply been in an elaborate sleepwalking state, but I'm not sure that explains the knife. While we were pondering, we could still hear Lucy pacing the cabin. A few minutes later, we heard the front door of the cabin slam shut. We opened the bedroom door, but Lucy was not there. Randy looked out the window and saw Lucy headed into the bitterly cold woodland, dressed in a t-shirt and shorts. Randy raced to his bedroom and yelled because the knife had vanished. Stacy insisted that we go out and fetch her since we couldn't leave her wandering in the woods in the middle of the night. especially if she was sleepwalking. Randy was afraid and refused to spend time with his new girlfriend. Stacy returned to our room and began putting on warm clothes and jacket. Randy pleaded with her to call a park ranger or something. I've known Randy my entire life, and I've never seen him so afraid. During our brief conversation in the bedroom, we heard the cabin door open and close. We all became silent and listened closely. Lucy was stomping down the hall toward her and Randy's bedroom. She was still humming. We stayed in our bedroom all night and did not sleep at all. At 6 a.m., we heard Lucy in the kitchen cleaning dishes. We all went out there, and she welcomed us as if nothing was wrong. Stacy and I put it all up to Lucy being a little off, and Randy dealing with some of his own troubles after breaking up with his long-term partner just before the vacation. Everything we experienced the night before was strange, but it could be attributed to sleepwalking or something like. Randy was convinced that something sinister was going on here, but Stacy quickly ignored it. She proceeded to assist Lucy clean, and I attempted to console Randy as best I could before he returned to his room. Not 2 minutes later, he contacted me, telling me to go to his bedroom immediately and not tell anyone. I went over there, and he showed me something horrible while he was packing up his belongings. He moved Lucy's luggage as he set it down. A huge knife fell from the side. Randy had seen the same knife the night before. Randy's fear was obvious and palpable. He returned the knife to her bag and waited in the living room for everyone else to be ready to leave. The drive home was fraught with tension. Knowing Lucy had a knife in her luggage worried me out. Thankfully, we arrived home safely and physically unscathed. Randy ignored Lucy after that, and she must not have cared because she never tried to contact him either. Stacy occasionally tries to find Lucy on social media, but she has never been successful. She even checked inmate jail records, but Lucy is still missing. There appears to be no documentation of Lucy's existence, leading us to believe she was using a fictitious identity. But if this is the case, what did she want? I wonder whether she meant to hurt Randy. I truly don't know what to think of the weekend. The fact that she possessed the knife, and there is no record of this woman, leads me to believe that whatever she was had evil intentions. I suppose it's a good thing she didn't act on them. I've been increasingly isolated from the rest of the world in recent years. I've always liked to be alone. And aside from a few people in my life, I don't enjoy being around others. A few years ago, I was at the peak of my introvert personality. I would go out of my way to find calm and quiet at this period in my life. I would frequently find cabins and other remote spots to stay on weekends when I had the funds to do so. That may appear ludicrous to others, but my anxiety about even routine encounters with people was so severe at this point that I would go to such extraordinary measures just to be alone. This excessive habit persisted for approximately 2 years. During that time, something happened during one of my weekend cabin getaways that completely terrified me. The weekend began like any other. I found an isolated cabin approximately 2 hours from home and traveled there. I normally spent my weekends hiking, spending time outside, and reading. I enjoy reading, and being out in the bush where it is peaceful always allows me to relax and concentrate. I got at the cabin on Friday evening, cooked a light dinner, read a few chapters of my book, and then went to bed. Early the next morning, I decided to go for a long hike. I've always found calm outside in nature, whether it's sunny, raining, or snowing. I just adore being outside. While strolling through the woods, I heard something behind me, twigs and branches snapping. You may have assumed it was just nature's sounds, but it seemed almost too purposeful. I tend to be unreasonable, so my imagination immediately went to someone following me. But each time I turned around, I surveyed my surroundings. I was totally alone. I continued hiking for a little longer, but the sensation of paranoia only grew. I intended to hike a bit further, but I decided to cut it short and return to the house. I had come to the point where I no longer enjoyed being outside. That night was especially tough for me. Maybe it was because of all the tension I was experiencing on the hike earlier, but I only recall feeling sad. I decided to take a drink, which developed into several drinks. I felt better as soon as the drinks hit my system, and all of my earlier nervousness faded away. I tried to read, but instead I turned on some music and began to vibe. Around 11 p.m., I believed I heard a knock on the door. I turned off the music and headed to the door. The entrance door was a massive wooden door with 2 rectangular windows cut into it. I peeked outside and saw nothing, so I moved away. Before I could sit down again, I heard another pounding on the door. I went back over to peek out, and this time someone was standing there, but it was too dark to see any details before I spoke. I turned on the front light, which mostly illuminated the man standing outside. He did not appear scary or untidy. It was the antithesis of that. A well-dressed man in a suit stood on the other side of the door. He stood around 6 feet tall, had an athletic frame, and was clean-shaven with a slick-back hairdo. This man was obviously out of place. He appeared to be ready for a business meeting rather than a moonlight walk in the woods. I couldn't understand why a man in a suit would turn up to an isolated cabin at 11 p.m. from my side of the door. I asked the man if he was all right and what he needed. There was a strange, almost unnatural wait before the man responded. It was almost as if he was absorbing what I said before responding. Then he finally responded, stating that he was driving with his girlfriend earlier. He stated he spent hours walking around looking for her and is now lost. He asked if he may come inside and call for aid. On its own, this was frightening and unnerving because a stranger appeared at the door in the middle of the woods. But one of the most disconcerting aspects of this was the absence of passion in his voice. This did not sound like a man who was disoriented and missed his partner. He sounded devoid of emotion. I told him to back away from the door and wait at the end of the driveway while I called for aid. He paused again and glanced around slowly, still lacking enthusiasm. He stated that he absolutely needed to come inside. Something was outside, and if he didn't go inside for assistance, he'd be in trouble. The strain I felt at this point was nearly unimaginable. I informed him that I was calling the police and that he could either wait outside or leave, but that he would not be allowed to enter the cabin. As I went away from the door to get my phone, I overheard him saying he wanted to hide inside the cabin. He was in difficulty and had to hide inside. I grabbed my phone, and he began to violently pound on the door. In the midst of my outburst, I raced back to the door and began screaming some obscene things at the man outside. I stopped yelling when I heard the man laugh. This was by far the most emotional the man had expressed. I peered out the window, and the man's face was virtually up against it. His face was only inches away from mine. I almost fell over from the shock of seeing him so close. He said calmly, "Come on, Victor, just open the door." Somehow, the stranger in his suit recognized my name. I was stuck for a few seconds before dialing 911 and telling them that I was staying in a cabin and that a strange man was attempting to break in. As soon as I hung up the phone, I looked out the window, but no one was there. I waited for the cops for about 15 minutes, never taking my gaze away from the glass. I saw no movement outside at the moment. It was just one patrol car. And when he arrived, I swiftly opened the door to let him in. I told the cop everything, and he looked worried and perplexed. He told me that none of the other nearby residents reported anything unusual, and that this was the first time he had received a call like this. The cop was friendly and could tell I was worried. He advised me to drive into town and stay at one of the motels if I was still terrified. I informed him that I had been drinking and did not feel safe driving my car, but I did not want to stay there alone. He was polite enough to offer to drive me to town. As we walked to the patrol car, I heard the officer make a strange sound, almost as if he was shocked. I asked what was wrong, and he pointed to my car's tires in the driveway. My tires were deflated and appeared to have been slashed. I began to unravel, and the cop did an excellent job of keeping me grounded. He drove me to a neighboring hotel and sat with me in the lobby until I could contact my father. I stayed in that motel that night, and my father came to get me up in the morning and assisted me with the details of having my car removed. The cabin owner apologized to me a million times, but I didn't care. I really wanted this experience to be finished. I did not even ask for a return. Some individuals have suggested to me that the owner of the cabin was engaged in this nightmare, or that the owner himself was the man in the suit, but I don't believe so. The individual had a picture of himself on his profile, but the man in the suit did not resemble him. I never received any responses, and I'm sure I never will. I still get chills thinking about that night. Even seeing those dumb prism windows scares me. I despise the thought that this man could still be harassing people somewhere out there. My father died approximately 6 months ago. I am not looking for pity or anything like that. I did not have a good relationship with him. He wasn't the bad person. He simply did not know how to be a proper father to me. Specifically, from a young age, I recognized I was not like him. I knew I wasn't going to be the person he wanted me to be, and I know it disturbed him, even if just subconsciously. Fast forward to 6 months ago when my father died, and I was astonished to discover that he had left me the cabin in his estate. Friends have told me that this was my father's last joke on me, but I don't believe that's the case. I believe he knew I would sell it, and that is what he intended me to do. After some tedious paperwork procedures, I was advised that in order to sell it, I needed to clean it up and possibly solve some of the issues that needed to be addressed. I used that as an excuse to remain at the cabin one more time. This was my method of saying goodbye to my dad. When I arrived at the cabin, the first thing I noticed was the foul odor. It smelled like death inside. And no, he didn't die in the cabin. He hadn't visited the cabin in about a year before his death. I looked around for dead animals, but I believe the house merely smelled bad from years of neglect. The second thing I noticed after the smell was that the cabin looked precisely like it did when I was 10. He still had the same furniture, the same disgusting couches, and the same bookshelves. Literally everything was the same. I spent a few hours downstairs, thoroughly cleaning every inch of the building. Fortunately, my father had repaired the roof a few years earlier, so it was the one thing I didn't have to worry about. While I was reviewing my list of things I wanted and needed to do, I kept hearing noises from above, like as rustling and movement. That's when I remembered he had an attic in the cabin. Attic might be a stretch. It's reminiscent of both an attic and a crawl area. It almost seems like it isn't sure what it wants to be. The back hallway in the cabin is located on the ceiling. In the back hall, there is a pull-down cord. When you pull the string, the door opens and one of the retractable ladders lowers. I gradually began climbing the ladder, expecting to be assaulted by a swarm of raccoons or squirrels. Instead, I was struck by an even fouler odor than previously. I started coughing due to the foul odor in the attic. After my coughing spell, I looked around and felt disgusted. There were boxes everywhere, but the worst aspect was the abundance of trash. Food wrappers, empty beer cans, and general debris litter the area. I knew my father wasn't the cleanest person, but I didn't expect him to be this nasty and disgusting. I picked up some trash, but I only stayed up there for a short time. The scent was terrible, and I was exhausted from cleaning downstairs. I wasn't psychologically prepared to go through all of the boxes and deal with the upstairs at that time. I put out a lot of trash and planned to clean upstairs tomorrow. Soon after I went to bed, I put some of my clean linens on his bed and slept in his old room. I awoke during the night because I believed I heard rustling again. I began to suspect that the walls had some form of animal infestation. That would explain why I continued to hear movement. If animals lived in the walls, it's possible that they died there as well. This would explain the stench. The only flaw in my argument was that the sounds I kept hearing were plainly originating from above my head in the attic. Since I wasn't sleeping well, I decided to plug my nose and go investigate. When I arrived in the back hall, I discovered that the attic door latch was open and the ladder was hanging down. I thought that was strange, but it's entirely conceivable that I didn't fully close the door, and the wind or raccoons pushed it down when I attempted to latch it. I observed another snack food wrapper on the ground at the bottom of the ladder. I couldn't believe there was so much rubbish. I grabbed it up, marched into the kitchen, and tossed away the rubbish. I got a water bottle, went into the living room, and sat on the couch. It was dark in the living room, and I knew I wouldn't fall asleep again, so I chose to stay awake. He had a little end table next to the couch, with a small lamp on top. I turned on the lamp, and it wasn't very powerful. It was a modest orange light, but it was adequate for the time being, allowing me to avoid sitting in utter darkness. I began to think about my father. Then I began to think of my father in this cabin. I was wondering why he would ever hang out in that ugly, unclean attic when he had the entire cabin to himself. Even though the cottage was awful, it was far preferable to a filthy attic. While I sat there, I noticed something strange in the corner of the room. It looked like a blanket was covering something near to the recliner. That alone wouldn't be unusual. What was strange was that I had cleaned the entire downstairs earlier, and I don't recall a blanket covering anything. I slowly got up and approached the blanket. I froze in my tracks. I was standing a few feet away from the blanket when I noticed what appeared to be the bottom of a boot protruding from it. I took a slow step back, trying to focus my eyes in the mostly dark room. I stared at the blanket and watched it shift. Someone was hiding under this blanket, and I knew it. I didn't hear any animals earlier. I could hear someone moving around. I stood there for a moment, watching the blanket. The more I looked at it, the more obvious it was that someone was hiding there. I could clearly see the blanket moving up and down from whoever was breathing beneath it. I didn't want to know anything else about this person. I slowly retreated to the kitchen where I grabbed my phone and keys before sprinting out of the cabin. I ran to my car, started it, and began backing down the long driveway while backing out. I looked up and saw a scary-looking, mangy man running out the door. He did not chase my car or anything. He simply ran outside and stood in front of the cabin. I called the local police department to report the incident. They told me that because my father had not been living in the cabin in a long time, some random person had most likely moved in for warmth. And when no one came to the cabin, he probably stayed. Based on the smell, he estimated that the man had been there for at least a year, which makes sense given that my father hadn't been to the cabin in a while before his death. The man had already fled when the police arrived. I have no other information about the man's identity, origins, or destination. I don't believe he meant to hurt me unless he had to. He clearly had numerous opportunities and did nothing. However, this did not change the fact that I was sitting next to a strange man who had been living in filth in my father's attic. I never went back inside that cabin after that night. I hired someone to clean it out without informing them. Maybe this makes me a jerk. They removed everything inside, and I sold it as is. I hope whoever owns the cabin now is as happy as my father was there, and that they never have to deal with the unexpected visitor.